Hey, cutie.
Okay, you guys are live.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Alison Emery, and I'm here today with Tim Smith. I'm excited because Tim Smith has been a longtime friend. Gosh, it's been about 15 years, right?
At least,
right,
yeah,
Tim?
yeah.
And during that time, Tim has been a treatment professional working with mental health systems in San Bernardino and specifically with drug court. So we're really excited to not only hear your story today, Tim, but also to hear a little bit about what's going on with drug court in San Bernardino. And before today's over, I'm going to write myself a note because I want to talk to you about the first step on the way out.
Okay.
Okay? So, Tim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be here. It's
Great.
exciting. You know,
You were-
I
you
felt
were-
I was pretty lucky to get involved in the stuff that I got involved in, you know. I kind of a believer that a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time and raising your hand. Oh, yeah, I think I can do that, whatever it is.
Being willing.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back
Yeah.
to high school days. I mean, that kind of work ethic, I guess. I don't know.
So you were telling me earlier that you had some interesting stories to tell about your childhood.
Well, you know, growing up, I mean, normal mom, dad. I'm the youngest of three, all boys. My dad, as I learned later on in life, must have had kind of an anger management issue because when I was 10 years old, we moved to Redlands, but that was my 23rd move. So I don't remember much from 0 to 10. In recovery, when I first got into recovery and started doing some step work and stuff, I was lucky to have two brothers to fill in some of the blanks, you know, because I just couldn't remember all the places we lived, you know. And it's funny because in the drug court world, I ended up doing drug courts all throughout California, but places like Fresno and San Luis Obispo, I had actually lived. So I would call up my brother, and they would know the address, the phone number, you know. So I would actually get to go to these places, these houses. Some I found in Fresno, the freeway took it out, but you know, so I moved to Redlands. I'm 10 years old, and my dad wanted to move within a couple years, but my mom finally put her foot down and said, "No, this is gonna be home." So that's what I consider home is Redlands. And you know, my dad came in and out of our life, very strict, you know, his way or the highway. But I think having two older brothers too, and a mom that worked hard, kind of shaped me, you know, because in our house it was like if you worked, then you got a little bit of privilege. Like maybe didn't have to go to school as often. So by the time I was a sophomore, I had 3 jobs. I had early morning paper route 7 days a week. I worked as a cook at a Tasty Freeze, a fast food, for 1 hour, which was nice because in high school I got out for about an hour and a half to miss whatever class that was. And then in the afternoon I went to work at Honda Redlands, and then all day Saturdays. We were just talking about spring break coming over here, and my spring breaks were always just an opportunity to work full time at the Honda shop. And when you have a 7-day-a-week paper route, you don't go far from home.
Now, you said your father was very strict. Was it a religious upbringing? Was it a military upbringing?
That's a great question because my mom's side of the family is very Christian Scientist. So we grew up with that influence, but my dad didn't have any part of it. He didn't talk bad about it, and I only remember going to church once because my mom with 3 boys, and we weren't really well-behaved boys. So I don't know if we were asked not to come back, but I know we never went back. But I had a grandmother that was what they call a practitioner in Christian Scientists. So many times in my life when I had broken collarbones or other things, I could call her and she would give me direction, kind of like a sponsor in other worlds. But I remember how soothing it was whenever I talked to her and gave me hope. And when I got into recovery, I used some of that Christian Science base to help me with, you know, our higher power and things like that. So, you know, my mom was not a good Christian Scientist as far as their lens because she drank and smoked. She loved to dance. My dad hated to, but that's kind of the only religion that we really had going for us. And so, but it was still, I mean, I still have very warm, loving feelings about that. And I remember an early conversation when I worked at Cedar House way back in the early days, and I lived in a sober living, and that man who became a good friend asked me my concept of God. And I said, well, I think God is love. And he asked me how I came up with that. And I said, I couldn't really figure it out. Years later, Lois Lauer from Redlands, a pretty well-known lady, Christian Scientist, had me come to a presentation, and we actually went to the Christian Scientist Church in Redlands, and there on the wall, God is love. I go, oh, I'll be darned. So maybe that one time I went there is where I have no idea, but it was just, one of those gifts in recovery that you get that, now it makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, I mean, growing up, I stayed in school when I was a senior. Didn't have real good grades, but they called me into the office, and I just figured I was in trouble again. And they gave me 20 units of credit for all 3 years, 60 units. So I graduated with flying numbers as far as units, GPA of, D minus or something. But it's funny too, because in my writings and stuff, figuring out both my parents were college educated, but I never remember one word about going to school. But then I got married at 19 too, so it was all about just working. And I remember quitting the motorcycle business and going to Valley College. Didn't last too long. I cut all my hair off. I was gonna, try to be a better husband and father and all that. And about 2 weeks later, I went crawling back to the motorcycle shop, begging for my job back. But and I stayed in the motorcycle business for quite a while. But one thing my dad used to always tell me, he says, "Why don't you do one thing and do it good?" And because my dad said, I fought against it. It was, so later in years, especially in the work with mental health systems, I learned how important it was to do one thing and do it well. So, I've been married a couple times, more than a couple, but finally, I had a couple good careers that I threw away, and they weren't all because of my addiction, but some bad decisions. But when I finally came back to California, I had moved away to Arizona and came back through a career away with UPS. It was very good. I got promoted early, but made a bad decision, came back, and then got into construction, and that's when my life kind of was going downhill for some years. And I remember way back then, seeing some late night commercials about the Schick Center. Come to us if you need help, 2 weeks and some follow-ups. And so that's what was my only lens of recovery, And I probably knew I needed help by the age of 30-ish, But then I came back to California, and I went back to my first wife's house where my kids were, and she let me stay there, and it took me 2 days to drive from Arizona. I was just messed up, I remember somewhere out there on the 10 freeway, there was a turnout where you can rest, and I pulled over, and I had a little Volkswagen with a trailer, all my belongings in a little trailer, and something happened. I, did some drugs and OD'd, or not OD'd, but nodded out, and I blocked the exit. And all of a sudden I wake up and people are honking and yelling at me, and and I remember I had to crawl underneath my car and wiggle the drive shaft to get it to roll and get it, and then run and jump in. But finally I made it to Redlands, and she put up with me. She, this is a woman that probably has never said but maybe 2 swear words in her whole life. And I was living in the back room with my son, and I stayed there for a while, but I still had those demons that follow us until we get clean. And so I wanted to get out of that house, so I finally got a place up in Yucaipa, but I was still using. They didn't know it, and that went on for 5 more years.
Talk about the demons that follow you.
Yeah. So, I was I used it pretty much everything under the book, but my last drug was methamphetamine. And so for me, it was more about working to use and using to work. So, not sleeping for, I don't know, I think 14 days was the longest I went. But always doing drugs, and then, hearing things, seeing things, shooting at them, And there's been 2 or 3 times where I called the police on the demons, and they would say something like, well, Mr. Smith, don't call us, we'll call you. And a lot in Yucaipa. And I always look at that like, why am I so lucky that I never got thrown in jail, or, never shot anybody? I shot through my roof. I thought through, my floors. carrying a gun and being an addict, for me, at least the people I hung out with, it was just, normal thing. A lot of my where I purchased drugs were through motorcycle clubs, so just kind of the way you roll. But talk about dangerous. But and it helped me later years when I went into mental health systems too, because that knowledge of using the gun and trying to shape some of the intake things we did in the drug court world, because that was a no-no at first, but my demons were mostly noises. So I would go outside in my underwear with a gun, and those were the demons that I was still hearing, even though I had a couple of days clean in '84 at my ex-wife's house. But I didn't want to bring that bad karma to the house. So as soon as I could, I found a place where, and I was lucky. I found a job as a land surveyor, so I was able to afford to get out. But I also ran into my buddy, and doing the same thing he was doing before I left for Arizona. And it wasn't days till I was right back in the same place, because we had this progressive disease. And, I worked hard. I always had a work ethic, and I remember going to work, coming home, driving to Redlands, checking in with my kids. And I remember their little youthful eyes saying, "Daddy, can we go to the movies? Or do you want to go to the movies? You want to go to the park?" And I would give them money. "Here, you go to the movies, and I'll go outside and, paint the house, mow the lawn," all that crazy stuff, And they were really naive about drugs and addiction, so they really didn't know, and especially their mom, she just wasn't aware that what was going on. But eventually she found out, and that was how I got into recovery. So that went on for 5 years of working and just surviving. Spending thousands of dollars on drugs, and I would always blame it on the public, because if you didn't all come and buy it from me, I had to use it. And that's the addict's story, I think, throughout. Then in 1989, my ex-wife had let me use her car. And we had those little kits that look like where you maybe have sunglasses, but really it was my rig, my spoon, all that kind of stuff. And for some reason, which is very weird, it was left inside of her car under her seat. And so she was driving around Redlands with my son, and he came out. I go, "Oh, look, Daddy's sunglasses." He is probably in junior high at this time. They opened it up. No, it isn't. She takes my son home, and I lived over in a little house in Redlands. And here comes this woman driving like Parnelli Jones. They had a long driveway. And I know something's up. I'm sitting on the porch, but because she never drives like that. And then she throws open her door and uses some foul language, which she never does, throws this at me and says, "We're done with you." And I was just in shock. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any defense of anything, But that night, it's pretty emotional. That night, my daughter called me, said, "Daddy, do you want help?" And I go, "Yes, I do," because I wanted help. I just didn't know. And she was 19, so in high school, she had known some of her friends that had heard about Narcotics Anonymous, and I had never heard of them. And so she gave me the information. She actually asked me if she wanted to drive me to the meeting. I said no. I think I was bicycling then, because whatever car I had was blown up. But I remember going to this meeting, sitting across the street at what now is Kuka's, but it used to be a Taco Tia place. And this church had a back entrance up a stairway. And so I didn't really see a bunch of people. I saw a few people drive up, but nobody said, "Hey, Tim, you want to go to a meeting?" or anything like that, of course. And so I just sat there and I didn't go in. But my daughter called me the next day and said, "Dad, did you go to the meeting?" No. She goes, "Well, do you want me to drive you?" So that was my motivation to go to the next week. And gosh, I remember that meeting like it was yesterday, because you went up these stairs, and this little bitty room, kind of like little couches, kind of like the 60s. Some men in there, all very happy, hugging each other, a few women, and I'm going, "Oh my God," in my inside voice. But I remember one of the things they did at that meeting is just going around the room and saying, "Hi, My name is Tim. I'm an addict. And it got around to me, and I had a hard time. I couldn't really talk then, you know. And, you know, I'm 116 pounds, missing every other tooth, hair sticking on end. But I heard something. I don't know exactly what, but I went back and got a directory and bought a book that night. And I remember those early days of carrying that book to every meeting and writing in it the date, who led the meeting, just, you know, busy work maybe. And I still have that book, and I have a lot of phone numbers in there. Of course, 90% of those people aren't around anymore, at least that I know of. But it was the start. It was the start of something that I never had the desire to use, at least in the early days, to relapse or anything. I was working, so I had a job as a surveyor.
So you had I guess what they call a high bottom.
I think so, and I said earlier, because when I read or listened in the book about we used to live and live to use, and I thought, well, my story is I worked to use, so you know, many jobs, so I could do more drugs, and so I felt so at home early on, you know, especially in the book. I went to a lot of different fellowships at first, you know, just trying to figure out how the thing worked. But for me, you know, I really found a home at Narcotics Anonymous. I remember taking all kinds of commitments early on, whatever, and being told no, because you didn't have enough time. There's a person in our fellowship, Cruz, and he was the chair of H&I back then. And I would go to the meeting over at San Bernardino, and they would say, they need people everywhere. And I'd raise my hand, and I'd say, I'll do that. And he goes, how much time you got? And I go, 90 days. He'll come back next month. And he did that for almost a year, because a lot of the panels back then, you know. But, and he's still a really good friend, and he doesn't mind.
So your catalyst into recovery was your daughter.
Yes.
It was really your daughter coming to you.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because a lot of times people don't have that one person that holds the hope for them, but you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, we all can be that person for someone else now. Right. So talk about your daughter for a minute.
Well, you know, what's really nice too is that, you know, because I left when they were pretty small, probably, you know, 5 and 6 or someplace around there. I got married really young. And then when I came back in their life, and I had come back from Arizona and visited and all that kind of stuff. And there had been times where, you know, I paid child support, I did, but, you know, to have my daughter, and when we came back and then, you know, reunite with them, and then for her to want to help her dad, I think was so overwhelming. And it was like perfectly the right thing. And I know now today that her mom was very much in that too. But those three, my daughter, my son, my ex-wife, because I would go there almost every day. I'd be bicycling around Redlands, because for the life of me, you know, I worked early, got off early, so I had a lot of time. But Shauna, and I share this with her all the time about how much, you know, she is the reason why I'm still here today. And, you know, being pretty darn healthy and active, and I feel really lucky, because a lot of people, you know, don't have that somebody that
Right.
would, you know, and to have that kind of family support. I'd go over there, and my ex-wife eats very, very healthy, so she would always fix me something to eat, you know, because when I first came back in '84, she was very embarrassed, because I would always send her to the store to get candy, because that's what we need to detox or whatever. But yeah, so Shauna Pie, that little girl is 50 now. In fact, she just called me probably 3 or 4 days ago about the coronavirus, all that, because I have COPD, I'm a diabetic. So she wanted to make sure her dad was doing the right thing.
Oh.
And yeah, and it was funny, because I was lying in bed watching the news, but it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. She goes, "What are you doing in bed at 10 a.m.? I go, "Shauna,
I'm retired.
I'm retired, but you know, how lucky am I? How lucky am I?" And you know, working those steps and that, and making those amends to those kids. Oh, of course, I don't know about women, but for me, my daughter was really a lot easier doing that step than with my son.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that just for a quick second. Working steps.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that have no idea what that means. So can we take like a couple of minutes and talk about working steps?
So, when you go to meetings, when you're still new in recovery, and I got clean in '89, so there was some people that said things like work the steps or die, blah, blah, blah. And so you hear about it right away. You have no idea what it is.
Right.
And you have a tendency to read the steps by yourself at the beginning, but then you have to make that next bold step in getting a sponsor to work the steps. And there's 12 steps. But for me, it was such a great experience. And I have, I wrote in different books, different notebooks. But I had a good sponsor that helped me. My first sponsor, we didn't work any steps. I heard him talk about baseball.
Oh.
So I wanted him to be a sponsor because baseball was my passion. So after I'd been clean a little while, we had to part. Stayed friends, but I found somebody that really wanted to do the nuts and bolts of NA and the steps, and had to start all over, call me 90 days, 90 meetings. But by working the steps, I knew I wanted to find that Tim, that 10-year-old baseball player Tim that loved sports and loved being around people that I had lost. And through the steps and through writing, and this is again where my brother, especially my older brother, he was so helpful and so understanding. And he was kind of in his own world of being an alcoholic at the time. But I think with me getting clean, and I was able to bring my brothers together because we were definitely had strained by that time. But and it was so exciting because things that I had been telling myself or telling you for years were in fact, of course they lie. But you tell them for so long you don't know. At least that was my story. So adding clarity and learning about things. And I used to always complain about my middle brother beating up on me and all this. But through working the steps, I found out it wasn't all him. It was me, my smart aleck mouth, trying to say something and run. And Danny was the fastest runner and the fastest, the best everything. So I always got caught. And maybe he was a little mean, but it was me. But it was such a cleansing and loving thing to do the steps, And you're right, because a lot of people, even in recovery, I think, they work maybe 1, 2, 3, and then they quit. And to me, I don't know, I've probably done them thoroughly 3 times. But...
And wouldn't you say the healing that comes from that really stems from starting to understand yourself, starting to understand why you gave your life over to drugs, why, understanding these things is critical to living the kind of life that you want to live.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Steps show you those things.
And right now, the hair on my arm is standing up. And I realized through working the steps that I could get this feeling, not knowing that it was the 12th step early on, but and that's, I remember, the first time I slammed drugs, that's what I felt. But now I was getting it through recovery. I go, oh my gosh, I've really found it. I've really figured it out. And then, early recovery, we all want to save the world.
Right.
So there was an opening in the phone lines. And back then it was a pager. So you held the pager for, I forget, a month or something. But so I worked construction. So I put a phone in my truck. I drove to all the jobs. I had my little beeper on. It went off, and I'm behind the instrument. I'm a surveyor. I'm telling all my gang, time out. I got to go answer this phone. And they allowed me. They allowed me that privilege. So, and I'd be on the phone for, however long, and then maybe even ask, is it all right if I get off a little early today because I got to go pick up somebody and blah, blah, to take them to a meeting. Full of it. But, that...
Great little plug for phone lines.
Yeah. Well, I never knew. I remember this one particular call, this guy called, and he swore everybody was after him. And I said, I'll come pick you up. And he goes, well, I don't know. They might hurt you. And I go, okay, well, I'll go ahead and come pick you up anyway. And it was in San Bernardino. And I took him back then. They used to have a podium meeting right on Arrowhead. So I took him to that meeting. And, life went on. And for some reason, I just happened to be at that meeting a year later. And he's at the podium taking his 1-year cake. And he's talking about the story of this guy from the phone lines picking him up. And I walk in. Oh, thank you. I know it.
We live for those moments.
We do. We do. And he was well and doing good. And, I don't know, when people say service work is part of the thing, it is. It really is. I mean, I wanted to learn how NA worked. That was the driving thing. But then doing pretty much everything, you know. And you remember when I found my niche as the NA auditor, because I'm a numbers guy.
Yeah.
Thank you, God. And working with David, you know, who is even.
He ought to have a lifetime commitment for that.
Yeah. But, you know, so it was just, you know, the phone line thing was fun and service was great. And again, it helped me realize and to take up some of that spare time you have, even though, you know, you're working and stuff. At least for a while I was working. And then it's interesting because that first year clean and that attitude that comes. So I had a boss that used to be able to push my buttons, especially when I was using. So when I got clean, I learned about boundaries. But then I went a little overboard. So I would see articles about men that grew up in dysfunctional homes, and I put them on his desk, meaning that was him. So it came to layoff time. Smith, boom, out of here. And it was hard. I remember going home because I was making like $16 an hour. I thought I was the richest guy in Redlands, you know. But I'd also heard about other members going to school. And so one day of craziness, the next day I'm at Valley College signing up. And again, they look into you and they say, well, Mr. Smith, you've been here 3 other times. I go, wow, I remember one, two, I can't remember all of them. But they say, if you do well, we'll erase all these F's, you know. And I was there for to be a counselor, of course. So sitting in the front of the class, you know, taking notes, got elected president of the Human Services Division, you know, all that stuff that happens, you know. But I remember at the first graduation, I spoke and I said, because this is 1992 or so, I said, well, I finally graduated from Valley College. It took me 23 years. It's a 2-year school. I'm hoping you all can do a little bit better. But, you know, it was just me and humor and glad that I was able to get through all that kind of stuff, too, because Faith was one of the women that had gone back to school to be a lawyer or something, and so she was very inspirational. And so I went, and Ronald Reagan was president. So he said that if you're on unemployment, which I was, but you're going to school, you give you 6 more months, 6 plus 6. And then for some reason, you added another 7 weeks. So I went 52 plus 7 weeks on unemployment, $240 a week. I was rich because I didn't have any payments except for my rent. Yeah, and my rent was $300 back then or something. Right. So, you know, I had money, yippee. And so I remember taking a bazillion units.
So did you become a drug and alcohol counselor?
I did.
And you got your credentials?
I did, and that's what I wanted to be, a counselor. And
it seems like that's a very common goal among recovering people.
It was, yeah. I remember doing interns, and then I ended up at Cedar House, and I worked at a bar in Redlands, a little pizza place one of my friends owned. Well, let me just back up a second, because I got my first job at the little dairy across from Redlands High School. So I'm 40-some, making $4 an hour selling ice cream and milk, and my friend Matthew comes through in his BMW convertible, looking all, hey, Tim, how are you? I go, well, you know, I'm making $4.50 an hour. Well, he owned the Sports Chalet downtown. He said, hey, I need a bartender. I go, well, you know, Matthew, I'm in recovery. And I said, I don't care, just come down. So he paid me $5.50 an hour plus tips. I mean, the first night I made like $100. It was beer and wine. And all the people in the recovery, I don't know, you know, because I didn't have a lot of clean time. But it was so fun. It was so fun. I had good food. I had bands 5 nights a week. And I was
interning. And it worked for you.
And it worked for me until Cedar House asked me, they said, well, we hear you're a bartender. We want to hire you. I go, easy. Give me a job. I'll quit. So I went back to Matthew and said, you know, I got a job finally. He goes, well, next week is my 40th birthday party. Will you just wait till then? I said, okay. And Matthew was quite a partier, you know, big bag of cocaine in his office and all that. But he's still a friend today. He's back in Redlands now. And that was just part of my way to finally get a job, because that job paid me $1,000 gross a month. Not much money back then. So, of course, I moved from beautiful Redlands to Bloomington to live in sober living. But it was a start, and I worked my way real quick. Probably within 10 months, I was a lead counselor, the most, blah, blah, because I'm very organized. I'm time managed. Well, you know, my first career as parts manager, then I went to UPS. I worked in accounting there, so I can't remember too much, but boy, am I organized, you know. Yeah. So, and it was a good start, and that was my diving board or to jump off into the drug court world
Springboard.
because I'd been there. Springboard, thank you. It was a couple years, and my friend Shirley in recovery, Shirley and Alfonso, called and said she had seen a little ad in the paper about a drug court in San Bernardino starting. Woohoo! There was a few challenges, interviews. I didn't have a suit. So a man that was in detox, his dad had passed and they were bringing his clothes in. So I got a suit from this bunch of clothes. And then his dad must have been about 4'11". So so the pants were a little low or short. And then I think it was a black suit and I only had brown shoes. My car wouldn't make it to San Diego, so I had to borrow a car. But going through all that, I had to go through 3 different interviews, and they hired me. I wanted the manager job. They hired me as counselor. And the manager that I hired lasted about 30 days, and he just didn't know what was going on. And finally, he got in my face and the other counselor's face about how we're dumb and he's not or something. So they finally fired him. So then San Diego Mental Health Systems calls me. I run down there and they say, we want to offer you the manager job. And me being tempted, it's about time. But that was the start of my drug court thing. You know, I got to hire this man that I had met in Cedar House. I had to get a waiver for him because he didn't have credentials back then. But it was the start.
Well, let's talk about what drug court is. Can you tell us,
Sure. So in 1989, the then Attorney General, Janet Reno, she wasn't Attorney General yet, I'm sorry, she was the DA of Dade County, Florida. Her and a Judge Stanley Goldstein, started the first drug court out of the premise of the revolving door. They were so sick and tired of having these cases and then they'd be back in 90 days or, and it was always drugs. So they started this drug court thing. But then they said, how are we going to do this? So they started bringing team members in, treatment, public defender, DA, probation, any kind of medical staff. And that was the first drug court. So
Would you say that was really a response to understanding that the disease of addiction is actually a disease and needs a medical and a legal approach to the problem?
That came a few years later. Now
they
might have known that. I don't know that, but I know because we didn't have the associations we have today, like the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, where we have scientists and people and big conferences and stuff. Back then, I wish I knew the exact premise, but I know it was a revolving door. That's what they teach, and that's what they say.
Recidivism, yeah.
So, and then L.A., Judge Marcos jumped on the bandwagon, Judge Manley up in Santa Clara, and then Judge Morris took a team to go visit them in Dade County. And there was about 5 of them, probation, DA, public defender, nobody from treatment on that visit. But he knew of a program that Mental Health Systems did called the Pride Program, but he didn't have anybody go. But that was kind of the treatment that he knew of.
Okay.
So he went and came back, got excited, started calling people.
Okay, drug court was modeled after mental health court?
No. Mental health court came later.
So mental health court came after drug court.
Right.
Okay.
And that's a great question because early days in drug court, we had plenty of people that had mental health issues.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't have doctors. We had a doctor that would do a waiver to make sure they were okay to treatment, but it was like a 5-minute interview.
Right.
So if you came in and you had mental health issues, we did our best to get you through all the loops, but the criteria to go to the next phase and stuff was killing these people, making them leave, get loaded, and we didn't see it at first. I believe the first one because I was the team leader. And finally, we got a little bit smarter, went to a few conferences, talked to some people, and then we started making different tracks for people that had different challenges. At first, it was like just buddying them up with somebody that maybe this person couldn't read really well or couldn't do all the assignments. So we made the criteria for graduation to the next phase a little bit different, And when some of the people didn't like that, some of the clients would say, well, why does Alison get a go, but she didn't finish all this stuff? Mind your own business. You do yours and Alison will do hers, or whatever it was, But it took a while. And, I remember a lot of people hitting walls, and we didn't realize it at first, but we were like the 18th drug court Today, there's about 3,000 to 3,500. So you can imagine, I'm talking to other judges.
Right. The work that you did really set the groundwork for everybody else.
Yeah, they have things called the 10 key components. So in the early days, I remember going to Denver, Colorado, to Washington, D.C., to these work groups to develop these things. And it was so good because we had judges. This one probation officer that used to come to Cedar House, he'd want to see somebody. I'd say, oh, no, you don't have a signed thing, get away, And we would kind of butted heads. Well, he was the probation officer in drug court. Thank you, God. And now Bill and I become the best of friends, and we go to all the treatment centers around San Bernardino County to get these releases upon intake so that we can come talk to them while they're in treatment and report back to the judge. And it was really neat because they knew me from the treatment world, and and probation became a friend because for us, the concept of drug
There's
court,
a new concept.
it was so good. It was so good because we would go in and talk to the judge. Probation would tell them what they thought because they had their mission statement to abide by. DA, public defender, and then treatment. And he wouldn't always make the decision. He would listen, and then we'd go in the courtroom, and then whatever happened, happened. Most of the time, we knew the decision beforehand, so then we go out and play the game, But I remember, like, the DA standing up and say, I don't think this person should go to jail. Complete opposite of his role. Public defender saying, I think he needs to go to jail for a while,
So if a person finds himself in drug court, they're going to have a full multidisciplinary team, and that's going to include the DA and treatment.
Right.
And every voice at the table is determining what path this person takes, including their own.
Right.
So that's really novel and unique. And when you found yourself there in your own personal recovery, you found yourself in drug court, that was it for you. You found your
It was so
your
good.
spot.
Early days, Judge Morris, I just get promoted to the manager. Judge Morris calls me, and we have a meeting in Dana Point. And it's with all the judges around California and Terry Gorski, well-known person in treatment, and we're going to do some training with judges. So I'm putting a suit on and everything. 'Cause I don't know. Judge Morris comes over in business casual. I go, can I go in and change? No. So we drive to Dana Point. And so in that drive, and we've only known each other for a week or something. So we're trading stories. I'm learning how he became a judge. I'm telling him about my journey to today, But I remember I kept looking over at the speedometer. And about halfway in the fight, he said, why do you keep looking over here? I go, I've never known anybody that drives the speed limit. Because he, 65 miles an hour, wherever the whole way. And it was just, new to me. I guess that says something about my driving. But we really bonded that day, We learned a lot. And he learned a new lens of recovery, of treatment, So then we got to do this training. And it was so funny because we'd give them a scenario. And then they were all on different tables, And at first, all the scenarios were, put him in prison for 6 months or put him in jail for 6 months. No, But it was so good. And I got to know a lot of those early judges. And everybody brought something to the team, And it was funny. Well, so Terry Gorski, we used to use a lot of his information, but we used to copy some of it. And that day after having the day, I went back to my boss and says, we can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we did it knowing it was illegal, but we didn't have much money back then. The grants then were $180,000 a year. Now they're up to $380 or something. So we were cutting corners. But I went back, and after spending a day, I said, we can't do this. So we decided had to share workbooks or whatever,
Whatever you have to do.
Whatever to do, but no more copying,
Exactly.
But
you're talking about cash register honesty at this point because you're applying the spiritual principles that are found in the 12 steps to your life, and it's impacting you.
Right. I can't look the other way.
So you've just jumped full into drug court. Amazing things are happening. Mm-hmm. What about you personally?
So, I felt so lucky because the life I was living, I had just given up, back in Arizona and all that. Just doing dope and working and dope and no relationships of any kind because I'm just about using. So coming back to California because I really knew I wanted to be here for my kids, in whatever shape or form that was. and then coming back and slipping right back. I mean, I might have not used for 3 days or something, but whatever it was, whenever I left her house and got right back in with my old buddy, I'm not blaming him, but he had a needle, blah blah, boom, there goes another 5 years. But for me to be able to find recovery and then start repairing all that damage, and I think one of the greatest things I was able to do was bring my brothers together. I mean, I remember having a Christmas, like an ornament party, but because we were so far apart. It only happened a couple of years because the Smiths don't do much family stuff, But for me, just and meeting all these people, one of my first buddies was Carrie. We used to drive around everywhere, and we weren't in a relationship or anything, but we just went everywhere, and she is gun-ho recovery, so it was very good for me. And then meeting people like Surfer Mike, he was a young guy back then, In fact, we were just sharing a story how in early recovery we were riding around Redlands in bicycles at Redlands Mall, and the security guard came out and asked us to leave the premise because we were like a nuisance. I'm 40 years old riding a bicycle, but we just laughed about it and we behaved, But I was starting to get Tim back, and it felt good, I wasn't really dating anybody early on, just working on me, trying to build a career now, get out of surveying and go to school. And I just ate school up. I just loved it because in my own high school days and stuff, I never really learned how to study. So I remember, and I got to be honest, most of my study groups were with women, but I learned how to study, and they would give me tips, and I would, I started carrying note cards, and getting A's, and it was just so fun. And then getting elected to be the president and all that kind of stuff of the counseling, whatever it was, human resources, all that stuff. And I remember not having really any issues. And a lot of people back then were like going to therapy, and I wanted to go to therapy. I wanted to have issues. But I remember that I didn't have anything until about 18 months clean. And I somehow heard or thought that my ex-wife was saying something negative about me to my kids. I don't really remember the circumstances, but I remember here's my coffee table and here's my gun, and I'm thinking about using it. I mean, I'm that low, but I had learned to know, and Shirley keeps coming to my head because she's the one that I heard of that 10,000 pound phone or whatever it was, And I called up my ex-wife and I said, we need to talk. And you talk about gut level honesty. I've probably never been honest like that day with that woman, but it went from honesty, tears, hugging, and ended up with some laughter over here, and hugging and putting the gun away. And so today, we have an 18-month chip, and I'm just going to kind of go out on this for a second because there's some data about that 18-month chip. And I think I'm a living example because at 18 months, I had done all my service work, but I was kind of in a little lull. And then this hit me. And, if there would have been an 18-month chip, would I handle it better? I doubt it. I'm just saying, though, that for me personally, in my journey, 18 months was a kind of a tough time. Mm-hmm. So when people say stuff about the 18-month chip, I usually have a thing, but I don't say anything in the meeting. Maybe afterwards I'll grab them and.
So chips are given in 12-step meetings, starting with like a newcomer chip, which is a person that has 29 days or less, and then there's a 30, 60, 90, right? And a 6-month, and a 1 year,
and a 9-month.
And a 9-month. And the 18-month is the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a new, relatively, I don't know, maybe it's been 10 years now, I don't know. So there used to be this guy, Charles in Redlands. So the 9-month, he'd always get out there and he'd use foul language, but he'd say, nobody gets blankety blank 9 months. And we used to all like, what the hell? But then after I got 9 months, I figured out, oh, he's just challenging us, Didn't know. That was old school way, get in your face, Back then, you go in a meeting, you didn't talk. You were lucky if you got to fold up chairs or clean the ashtrays, That was a privilege. And then you got to be the coffee person. Oh my God, now everybody knows your name. But, nobody, you raise your hand and they just, listen, shut up,
Times are different.
Times are different now. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just the era I grew up in, We had meetings in Redlands, not every night of the week back then, so you had to go all the way to San Bernardino. Whoopee, But the chips, I was just telling somebody a couple of nights ago, the 30-day, 60-day, it was so. It was such a great plan by AA or whomever, but it really gives you that strength in those early years or early times, and very powerful. Everybody's, very proud of them. And, in drug court, we celebrated those too. And then, teaching the team how important they were, So I felt very lucky to be able to do what I was able to do in drug court because, again, right time, right place, and the right judge, Judge Morris.
So how long were you involved in all with drug court?
All 22 years.
All 22 years.
So I started one. Right before that, though, I had been starting to look after other treatments. I mean, I did drug court. Okay, so I started the first one. It was the first one in San Bernardino County, 18th in the country, but it's still relatively new. We don't have any associations yet. We don't have anything, no conferences, nothing. So when it got up to 100, I think it was when we had our first conference, because I have a T-shirt saying the first 100, then we started having those meetings and establishing some guidelines like steps and principles like, recovery. And it was great because the early days, everybody knew everybody, and we did a lot of phone calling because we just didn't have any things to go by. Now we have like the 10 key components. So when you write a grant or you do any kind of stuff, you got to include those because the counties now are saying you need to incorporate the 10 key components. So that was good. And then pretty soon everybody wanted them. So again, I was in the right place at the right time. So we started bidding on them. So I started 4 or 5 in San Diego County. I don't know how many in San Bernardino, I think 7 altogether. And then I ventured out and did Santa Barbara, Santa Maria. Those were existing. I just took them over after a while. San Luis Obispo was brand new. Fresno was brand new. I think it was 17 by the time I got done, 17 drug courts, where most people have 1 or 2.
So I want to stop for a minute and just really contemplate the number of people whose lives you have touched in a positive way as a result of those 22.
I was really lucky a couple weeks ago at the Bakersfield Conference, NA convention. So I'm just sitting there with a couple of my friends in the hallways, and a man comes up and says, "Are you Tim Smith?" or something like that. I go, "Yeah." I don't recognize him. He goes, "I was your very first client in San Luis Obispo Drug Court 21 years ago."
Wow, I hope you got a picture with him.
I don't think I did. I did.
Goodness.
Yeah. But those kind of things. And then I just got to give a cake. I didn't give her a cake. I gave her a chip at a meeting a week ago or so of a gal that I picked up at CIW and took to Cedar House 26 years.
No kidding.
And her first day was crazy because we went back to Cedar House and the place was just a mess. So we put everybody in a room and I walked around and I do what I did back then. But I remember giving her a chip because she was the newest person. And in fact, I think I brought some of those today because I wanted to make sure I gave you one. Because part of what Tim likes to do is give stuff away.
Nice.
I'm going to give you a couple of them. But when we first come in the rooms, we have no idea of the gifts that we're going to get back. No idea how special. I mean, for me to be able to get into drug court, be well known. I had a couple of women in San Diego and Riverside, Pam. I can't remember Pam's last name right now, and then Debbie Sema in San Bernardino. They're drug court coordinators, but I would call them my work wives because I spent 20 years with them,
Right.
I mean, and Debbie, she's the vice president of the Drug Court Association in California, so we're still talking and seeing each other all the time. But we traveled this country as teachers and then as consultants, and it was so fun because you get to go all kinds of places. And it's the only place in my life where if I'm working with a team and you're the judge and you're the problem, I get to have the exit interview and very politely and professionally, Your Honor, they're looking for more leadership from you. Because I would never be able to say that to Judge Morris, I mean, you just don't, that's suicide.
So did you ever have one of those moments where it was kind of surreal when you thought, here I am telling a judge how to behave?
Oh, yeah. But, a lot of them call you after that because and there was a judge in Needles. And Debbie liked to go out there a lot because he's very good looking too. So we went a lot of trips out to Needles. But anyway, he would call me more often than any other judge, just for little, because he was brand new and pretty big drug court. It was supposed to be 8 people, and they were up to 40 within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And with no funding. But there's no way. So I'm going to my boss. I'm saying, we're just going to do this. We have 6 different funding sources out in that building, so we can manage it, But there's no way, because in Needles at the time, it was pretty much an epidemic. Everybody was on meth.
Wow.
And this judge came in, and it was so good that they finally closed that drug court down because there was no more clients. Now we don't know. Maybe yeah.
That's a success
we think
story.
They might have, just moved across the river to Bullhead City.
Well, we need to do a little research on that.
Yeah, and that manager was the reason. Patty Munson is her name. She finally retired. But I would call her the mayor. We'd go to lunch with the judge, and in Needles, small town. But I couldn't talk to him because everybody in town, oh, hi, Patty, hi, Judge, they're well, because she lived there her whole life. Mm-hmm. But she was in fact, the day we were supposed to present to the Board of Supervisors out there, I'm driving out with Debbie Seaman, and we're talking, driving a county car, and all of a sudden she goes, look behind me, and there's a bunch of smoke coming out of the car. She blew the car up. Oh, no. So we're sitting on the side of the road. We got one coming, but it's ours, and I'm still smoking this, so I'm having an attack because it's 120 outside. So I'm trying to keep breathing, and we finally get to town, and Patty's done the whole presentation without even knowing what a drug court is, just winging it. But what a start! Yeah, what a start. I was really lucky because in the drug court world, like I said, I got to be well known, got a lot of neat jobs, going different places. It usually was myself and a judge. I'm treatment, they're the judge. Right. And you go for like 3 days, you come home and you write it up. And then in 2006, so the Stanley Goldstein, he finally passed on, the judge, but they made a drug court hall of fame, Stanley Goldstein Drug Court Hall of Fame. And so in 2006, I got inducted to that Hall of Fame.
What?
So it was pretty neat because it's only one person a year in the whole country. So
Tim, that's awesome.
It was very good.
Wow. That's such amazing affirmation of the work that you've done.
Yeah, and it was all because of Narcotics Anonymous. I got to say, I did the work. I went back to school. I cut my hair off, because when I first started, I had real long hair. And I tried to get on the board of directors of National Association of Drug Court. Not really me and the person at Impact. I can't think of his name also, but he was trying to get on it too. And then we found out later that you pretty much got to be a judge or, somebody of some influence, and we really weren't. But I came home and cut my hair. I thought, well, maybe it was it, It wasn't it. But
wasn't it?
It was quite an honor, yeah.
So the drug court story is just amazing accomplishment in recovery, but has the rest of your life gone as smoothly as peaches and cream?
Well, I'd say yes. I got married in recovery and was married for quite a while. A woman that was very highly loved and respected in recovery, and we just kind of went zoom. She is fantastic at what she does. I was good at what I did, so we were just, and we had a really great life, did a lot of great things, influenced a lot of people. She touched a lot of lives. And then I finally had to go through Hep C treatment. And that was back when it was the 48-week. And it was nasty. It was really nasty for me. Even though I tried to work, I got in a couple of accidents.
You did the interferon?
The interferon, yeah.
Miserable.
And so somewhere in there, and I don't want this to sound, but I was the worst Tim that I could have been.
The worst
and
version
she just
of
had
yourself.
enough. I don't blame her. She had enough, So we got divorced and tried to stay friends. Right now, I'd say we're cordial, a lot of respect for her. We did a lot of great things, had a lot of great houses and lives and stuff. But
a lot of happy memories.
Yeah. And then, I kind of stayed with myself for a while. And then I have a manager of my Redlands Drug Court, Vicki, and she said to me more than once, there was a probation officer that I met through drug court. By that time, I was kind of out of the day-by-day stuff, but I'd see her in graduations, team meetings and stuff. And then she kind of moved up the ladder in probation also. So, but we'd see each other at graduations. So Vicki would say, you and Kathy you ought to ask her out for a date. And, dating, it's like weird. So I remember calling Kathy, and I don't remember exactly how the phone call went, but something like, Hi, this is Tim Smith. I want to make sure which Tim, I know this might be a weird phone call, but I was just interested or wanted to know if maybe you'd like want to go out for coffee. Well, there it is. Okay, call me if you do, or something like that. Kind of like fifth grade level, But lo and behold, we went to have coffee. Talked nothing about drug court, and we were movie buddies for probably 6 months. And by movie buddies, I mean we have a soda, one popcorn, but 2 straws in the soda. We wouldn't want to use the same straw.
Okay, then.
And we just did things together. I lost my older brother right at the beginning of that relationship, and she was there for me. That's a whole nother thing that recovery really helped me with was my brothers. But and then finally we went on some motorcycle. She'd never been on a motorcycle ride, so I took her to Redlands Market night one night. The second ride was with the sheriff's run with bazillion motorcycles, and. This is a woman that, is not really your motorcycle mama or whatever.
Right.
She had a house down at the beach. I was a guy that wanted to go in my RV down at the beach, But we've been together close to 7 years now, and it's just been so good because, we have a lot of differences, and she has a lot of different groups of women friends, Orange County, probation, blah, blah. And I know all of them, and I'm involved with them in some places, But then I have my men friends also, It's funny, though, because and my men's circle, all of them, I'm sure, but they'll come over for a couple hours, and then they'll leave, and Kathy will come over, and she'll say, well, how's Scott or how's Louise? I go, oh, no, they're fine. Well, what about this? I go, I don't know. I don't know. We didn't talk about that because, you women, you talk about everything and you remember that. But, yeah, it's been good. We've traveled a lot. This woman has cousins everywhere, so we've got the chance to go all around the United States and stay at people's houses. But I feel so lucky. We talk about it all the time. Our kids are doing well. Her kids are doing well. We have... the ability to help some people now and then, and I don't know, it's just, I have to pinch myself because I'll be 70 this year, but I feel like I'm 30 or something. We have this gym, a little plug for the gym, Ultimate Kickboxing here in Redlands, but we love it. We go there, it's closed now because of what's going on in the country, but we go there and we work out hard 3 days a week. She's a runner, so we've been on some runs. We went to Canada and ran in the rock and roll half marathon there, and I didn't really train, either did she. I was in charge of training, that's why we didn't train. So at mile 9, my legs just get cramped up, but it's a rock and roll marathon, so at every other corner there's rock and roll going on.
Okay.
So Kathy is up at the corner and the Macarena is going on, so she's dancing away. I'm yelling, Kathy, because I need her shoulder so I can, Finally, she comes back and we work it out and we finish. And it was, one of those things that just is, I never thought I'd be running, a half marathon, let alone even a mile. I smoked since I've been in 5th grade. I quit in 2007, but, I still have lung issues,
Yeah.
But, I just, with us being a couple, we do a lot of things. Like, maybe I don't want to go to the gym and say, well, come on, let's go, or vice versa. And it gets us there. And we always say the same thing every time after the gym. I'm glad we came.
You hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I just, I always attribute that if I hadn't found Narcotics Anonymous, who knows? Because the life I have, the life that we have now, I don't think it could get any better, I mean, I have a Harley Davidson, I have my RV. I always use this thing too. Like I could take my keys and just give them to you, Alison. Oh, there's my car, go ahead and use it. Where in the old days, I'd have to tell you, oh yeah, you got to hold this over here and put these wires together, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's not that way today. We, we feel really lucky and grateful and try to, really build on our friendships and stay. I'm maybe even, I love keeping contact with all my high school people. That's why I love Redlands. I won't ever leave, probably.
Yeah.
I have my one friend, Felix, I met the first week I was here in 1960. Felix is a Hispanic. We didn't know back then much difference between Mexicans, whites, whatever, but I have blue eyes. So I remember early on, I don't remember, he tells the story that we were down at his house and he looked at his mom and he goes, Mom, what's wrong with Timmy's eyes? Because, I have blue eyes,
yeah.
Yeah, but he was a great friend and he still is. And I really value those friendships, Sometimes when somebody drops by my house, unannounced. But I went to high school with them or something, or I go to Arthur's in Mentone, and then it was, last week we were over there a couple weeks ago, and just a whole group of guys that I went to school with.
And that you still have relationships with.
Yeah,
And that's fantastic.
And try to keep them up.
That's so fantastic.
Yeah, and none of that would be available without recovery, without working on myself, working those steps.
Well, if you were to speak back to the Tim before recovery, the one that was lost in addiction, even before your daughter came to you, what would you want to tell that Tim?
Because there was no internet back then or anything, but I try hard to get into recovery earlier. I wish I had done it earlier, but I was just I had no idea that there was this life available.
That something else was possible.
Yeah,
so maybe that's what
up.
you'd say, Tim, there's something else possible.
I'm wearing long sleeve shirts in Phoenix in 120-degree weather to cover my marks up, thinking I'm fooling you all.
Not so much. Hey, well, listen, before we say goodbye, I'm wondering if you could explain to me what the first step is and how it works.
Well, for me, I remember Tony D used to always say, I can't, he can, so let him, kind of the first 3 steps. So talking about, me saying that I'm powerless and that I can't do it by myself. And those first 3 steps are all just so freeing to me, and again, early recovery, you kind of do them by yourself until you learn that, if you don't communicate with another human being, then they're not really valid. And I love the fact that I had men in my life that were willing to work with me. Nowadays, we have step working guides and all that, and that's all good.
Yeah.
I remember working my steps out of the basic text and the AA book a little bit, but it was so confusing because I was, of course, trying to do 2 fellowships at once or whatever. But it was still the gift of freeing myself and saying that I'm powerless. And I fought with that whole powerlessness because I still do even sometimes, but I know that I'm powerless over drugs, and that's the key to learn that. And it was an easy lesson because once I quit, I had no detox period. Usually with meth you just sleep for days, but I didn't even have that because I don't know if it was God or whatever, but it just touched me so much that I was just high on life right away. The freedom from active addiction, there's so many lines in NA that I love, but the one where one addict sharing another is without parallel. To me, that's so strong because without parallel, you can't measure it. And we get it all the time when we're either on a phone call with somebody, we're at a meeting, we're talking with somebody, and all they want is our ear. Sometimes they don't even want feedback, I love it when I have a couple sponsors that call me pretty regularly, and I tell them all the time that now it's just a friendship. They might still ask me stuff, maybe I don't ask them as much, but to have those kind of friendships and it's through working the steps. And I know I can't do it by myself. I know I need you. I need people in my life. I need a power greater than myself. And I have issues. Like I've tried to, I know a lot of my friends that are like, going to church and stuff. It's just not me. It doesn't work for me. Not nothing bad about them. It's just their thing. It's not my thing. But,
so you've referenced quitting smoking a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So did you work steps? Did you admit you were powerless over cigarettes and that they made your life unmanageable?
Yeah. I've done everything. I remember smoking cigarettes with 2 patches. Back in UPS days, they sent me to California to work on some computers, learn some stuff. They sent me to a hypnotist. So this is 1970.
They're really desperate for you to quit.
Right, right. So I did quit, but then as soon as I came home, I had a 4-bedroom house, rented 2 rooms out to a bartender and a surveyor, cigarettes on every table. So I just started like that. Then, fast forward into California, patches, gum, all that stuff, but no commitment, no step work. So finally Chantrex, but Tony D was my sponsor then. And so we actually worked some steps. And there was this event at work where this woman was accusing me of some stuff, not sexual, but just bad behavior or something. So we met down in the court in Hemet, or Temecula, wherever it was. and there was my boss who was a therapist, PhD, and so she was here. He was reading what she had wrote. He would ask her like, "Okay, can you give me an example of when Tim did this?" She goes, "Well, I knew he was thinking it." And so time after time, these kind of answers, I'm sitting back just saying, thank you, God, because I know there's nothing. So I'm on cloud 9 after that meeting. I know she's going to wherever she needs to go to. I'm driving back home, and I call Tony D, and I'm on cloud 9. I say, oh, man, this meeting went really good. And he goes, okay, oh, that's great, Tim. But let's get real. When in the hell are you going to quit smoking? And that's the day I did it. Just him being that gut level honesty, and for me, I knew I had to go back home and tear every cigarette up into pieces, because I'd be in the and August 7th 2007, I think. But,
Congratulations
yeah.
for that. I've heard it said that it's more difficult to quit smoking than it is to quit drugs.
I quit when I first got clean. Why? But I started again. But yeah, I truly believe that.
Well, that's a big accomplishment.
Yeah.
Congratulations on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we'll say goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for coming, and hopefully you'll come back and we can discuss some other important issues.
Yes.
Okay,
Sounds good.
great. Perfect. All right, well, that's it, folks. Until next time, bye.
All right. Powered right on.
Did we get it an hour right on?
Pretty close, I think.
Fabulous.